Hello and welcome back to revise GCSEhistory.co.uk. This is the second video in the topic, the Homesteaders, and in this video we're going to be looking at the problems and solutions of the Homesteaders. Quite a long video today, as we've got quite a lot of information to get through. I'll just tell you this before we start, I have actually recorded this video once, and then I'd got to the end of the video, and my computer decided to shut down without saving the video, so I was not happy at all because it's quite a long video really, and now I've got to do it all again. So hopefully we'll be better the second time. Let's make a start. So this video just contains lots of problems and solutions that the homesteaders faced and overcame on the Great Plains. So it may seem like there's tons of information that you've got to learn, but you don't need to learn every single point on all of my slides. You just need to be aware of the bare bones of this information and just the key points of what problems and what solutions the homesteaders had. So there's probably about I think it's about 12 problems and solutions in this video, so we'll just get through them as quick as possible. I'll just talk as fast as possible, and then it's just up to you really to go away, learn them. But you don't, like I say, just learn the key points. So, first problem is water shortages. In many places on the Great Plains, water was scarce, so it was difficult for people to keep themselves clean, and also for them to water their crops. There were no rivers or lakes to irrigate crops with, and digging a well was expensive and did not guarantee water. Don't learn that bit there, that's just a bit of extra information. So the solution to this was that Daniel Halliday invented the windmill in 1874, and the windmill always kept in line with the wind and was used to pump water from underground. That's one of the solutions to overcome the problem of water shortages. There is a second one. The second one is dry farming, and this was where the land would be ploughed after heavy rain to preserve a layer of moisture in the soil. We're going to be looking at dry farming again in just a second. Another problem that the homesteaders faced when farming on the Great Plains was weather extremes. So it was hot in summer, hot in summer and cold in winter. There was low rainfall and fierce winds blew, and this made life very difficult. Crops could be destroyed and damaged, and the homesteaders did not move about and hunt like the Indians. They were farmers and stayed in one place. The solution to this was dry farming. We've just briefly talked about it. We're going to look at it now in a tiny bit more detail. So, farmers ploughed their land when there had been heavy rain or snow, and this left a thin layer of dust over the surface which trapped and preserved moisture in the soil. Just learn what dry farming is. So the land was then fallow, ready for the following year's crop. Alright, some more problems here. Problem of fuel, quite a quick problem and solution to go through. So on the Great Plains there was no wood for burning, for heating and cooking, and the solution to this was to use buffalo or cow chips. And chips were just dry dung as fuel for their fires. So, buffalo and cow dung were used as fuel. They were burnt by the homesteaders as fuel for their fires. Dirt and disease, how was this problem overcome? Well, there were outdoor toilets and open wells. SOD houses leaked and were very difficult to clean. They harboured fleas, bedbugs, mice and snakes. Sounds very unpleasant, doesn't it? So diseases developed easily and the death rate was quite high. So in these squalid conditions you can imagine that disease would spread particularly easily. The solution to this was that a thick coat of whitewash was used by homesteaders to kill bedbugs, and a layer of clay stopped leaks. Eventually the homesteaders started to build more modern houses that didn't leak and weren't as difficult to clean as these sod houses were. And we're going to be looking at what the term sod houses means in a bit more detail in a second, because I'm aware that we haven't covered what it means quite yet. Okay. Sod houses, here we are, as I said. So building materials. There was very little wood available on the plains to build log cabins, and often the only building material available to the homesteaders was earth. So settlers built sod houses, and sod houses were made from bricks that were made out of blocks of earth. So mud, really. I suppose they're mud houses in a way. This house up here, this homestead, although it may look like it's been made out of a sort of brick structure, these bricks you can see are just blocks of earth that have been packed together, and windows and doors were also fitted around the sod bricks in the sod houses. The houses were roofed with boards, grass and more sods. The outside of houses were plastered with clay-like mud. Okay, natural hazards. What natural hazards were there on the plains? So, when the grass was dry, it was easy for prairie fires to start on the plains. Prairie fires could spread easily and destroy homesteaders' crops. So, homesteaders could lose lots of money and perhaps even go bankrupt through natural hazards and natural disasters such as this. There were also plagues of grasshoppers, which destroyed hundreds of acres of cornfields in a few hours. So, plagues of grasshoppers and prairie fires destroyed crops, costing the homesteaders money. Unfortunately, there was no solution to this. The homesteaders simply had to endure this problem, as there was no quick fix, and it's something they just had to get on with, really. Okay, so some more problems we're going to look at here. Sorry, it does seem a bit like problem solution, all a bit samey this video. There's just lots of information you need to be aware of. But I wouldn't panic, to be honest, as long as you learn a few of the problems and a few of the solutions in good detail, you should be alright. Don't learn them all, just learn a few of them that you can bring into your exam answers. So, ploughing. The Great Plains had never been farmed before, and the grasses had dense, tangled roots, which were difficult to plough, and this meant that early cast iron ploughs needed constant repairs. The tough, dense, tangled grasslands of the plains made ploughing very, very difficult, and this broke early ploughs. The solution to this was the invention of a stronger plough. A stronger plough was invented, and that's called the Sod Buster. I would learn the name Sod Buster, really. Yeah, the Sod Buster plough was invented, and that was invented by John Deere. And this Sod Buster plough could deal with tough grass roots. It could plough the lands better than the early cast iron ploughs. And also from the 1880s, other new farming machinery was also developed. This included reapers, binders, threshers, and this machinery is affordable, and it also increased the amount of land that a homesteader could farm. Due to the invention of better and more able machinery, homesteaders could own and farm more land, and this meant they could grow more crops, which in turn meant more profit. So, protecting the crops now. There was no wood for fencing, so there was nothing to protect growing crops from buffalo or straying cattle. This meant that a homesteader's crops, imagine you've just set your crops in your homestead, they've been growing a few weeks, and then some buffalo come and trample on them. That ruins the crops. So there was no way of protecting them. There was no wood for fencing. It was also not possible to mark land boundaries out clearly, so you didn't know whose land was whose, and this often led to disputes over land. The solution to this, quite a clever solution, is in 1874, Joseph Glidden invented barbed wire fencing, and this picture up here shows an advertisement for barbed wire fencing, and barbed wire fencing provided a cheap and effective solution to the problem of fencing and also the problem of protecting crops. And we can sort of see how effective barbed wire fencing was to the homesteaders, because it's still something that we use today. Today we still use barbed wire fencing. So, and then it was developed years ago. Alright, some more problems I'm afraid we've got to go through now. Growing crops. At first the homesteaders planted crops they had always grown. For example, maize, soft winter, spring wheat, and they soon found out that these crops failed, they weren't successful at all, and they were just not well suited to the weather conditions of the Great Plains. You may remember from the videos on the Plains Indians, we did a video on the Great Plains, and we said that the Great Plains had an extreme climate. There were strong prairie winds, very hot in summer, very cold and blizzardy in winter. Strong winds blew all year round. So these crops that that people had previously grown in the east were just not suitable to the plains. Homesteaders soon recognised that wheat was more suitable crop than corn to be growing on the plains, and many decided to keep animals as well as growing crops, not relying solely on crops because of the extreme climate. Turkey red wheat was a crop grown by the homesteaders that was more suited to the climatic conditions of the Great Plains. Turkey red wheat is a specific crop that was introduced to the homesteaders, and to be honest, for your exam, I would, if I was you, learn the name Turkey red wheat, because it's a good example of a crop grown by the homesteaders, and it's a good example of showing how they adapted their farming methods. Okay, another problem was housework, so there was no wood for fuel and no shops to buy items, no shops. So people couldn't simply go out and buy household items such as candles and soap. What they needed, they had to make themselves. So, yeah, they couldn't just go and buy stuff like we do today. And a typical household didn't have many possessions. It only had 2 buckets, some crockery and 1 cracked cup. There was no water and little food also. So the homesteaders didn't own much, and they had few possessions really. So what was the solution to all this housework stuff? Well, if people were lucky, a travelling shoemaker might pass, and he would be able to sell or mend household items, but usually families just had to make do, and women often had to make household items such as candles and soap. Women also collected buffalo chips or cow chips, and they were dried buffalo dung or dried cow dung, and these were used for fuel as an alternative for burning wood. Okay, so the final 2 problems we're going to look at in this video, we are getting there, don't you worry. Okay, is isolation. Well, many became very lonely on the plains and became quite isolated. There were no doctors or midwives to care for the health of women. When we talk about isolation, we're particularly talking about women specifically. And we've got a video on the life of female homesteaders and what it was like for those. So many had no social life because of the large distances between farmhouses, because people owned such a huge amount of land. Like the government acts give you 160 acres of land. That's absolutely loads of land. So because people owned so much land, there were huge distances between farmhouses. This meant that people just didn't have a social life, and they actually developed mental health conditions due to the isolation and loneliness that they suffered. In winter, families were shut in and they just longed for spring. Don't learn that, that's just an extra point to demonstrate how isolated and lonely some people were. So the solution was to this was to make the most of any trip to their nearest town. When they did this, women would talk of the harvest and the men would smoke corncob pipes and talk about politics. So that's how they overcame the problem of that. We'll look at this a bit more in the Women Homesteaders video. Final problem we're going to look at today is law and order. So local government was non-existent, and some early lawmen, such as Henry Plummer, who was a bit of a vigilante, we'll come across the term vigilante again in a later video. So don't worry too much if you don't know what that means for now. So these early lawmen were worse than the bandits in some cases. The solution to this was that law courts and sheriffs such as Wat Earp slowly established law and order. They did. Alright, so just the final thing we really need to look at is, we've talked about problems and solutions of the homesteaders, but let's talk about their successes. So, what factors determined whether a homesteader would be successful or whether they would not be successful? So, the exact location of their land. Some parts of the Great Plains were more fertile than others, and it was easier to grow crops in some areas than it was in others. Adaptability. Living and farming on the Great Plains required homesteaders to adapt their farming techniques massively. It was very different to farming in the east back home. The extreme climate meant that they had to grow new crops, invent new ploughs, and all these sort of things. And homesteaders who just could not adapt to the demands of the Great Plains did not succeed. Weather was also another factor. The severe droughts of the 1870s and 1880s forced thousands of homesteaders into bankruptcy. Some homesteaders were just terribly unlucky with the weather. Hard work and determination, I think, is the most important factor in determining the success of the homesteaders. And those homesteaders who survived and managed to adapt were helped by a number of inventions and developments, and those who didn't get there weren't. Alright, so I've actually covered all of the stuff we need to go over in today's video. I'm sorry it's been a little long, and it's seemed like we've gone through lots of problems, lots of solutions. If I were you, I'd just pick a few problems and solutions that you think you're going to remember and learn them for the exam. If you can learn them all, that's absolutely brilliant, but just be aware of all of them. Learn a few in detail. So, as I've said, I've actually talked through this video twice now, so, you know, I'm getting pretty fed up of homesteaders' problems and solutions. If this one doesn't save, I will scream. So, usual sort of flavour now. Do you know your stuff questions? 4 knowledge recall questions based on all the knowledge we've talked through in today's video. If you're feeling confident, pause the video here, scribble down some answers. If not, carry on watching. We'll do the answers together. The answers then now. Question 1. How was the problem of farming with a lack of water overcome? I can think of 2 ways here. The first one was dry farming, when a layer of moisture was preserved in the soil after heavy rainfall. The second was the invention of windmills, and they pumped water from underground. Question 2. What invention helped to overcome the problem of fencing and protecting crops? Well, that was the invention of barbed wire, and that provided a cheap and effective solution for fencing and protecting crops. Question 3. Next question. Why was isolation of homesteaders a problem? Well, it led to mental health problems, the lack of a social life. Question 4. Give a factor that determined whether a homesteader would be successful or not. One I can think of is the exact location of their land, because some parts of the plains were more fertile than others. For question 4, you could have had any of the answers from this slide here, any of these 4 answers. Okay, so there are the answers to the 4 quick knowledge recall questions for today's video. Thanks for watching this video today. I do hope you found it useful. I'm just very pleased to get to the end of this little subtopic, seeing as I've recorded it twice now. If you have found it useful, head over to the website revisegcsehistory.co.uk to view more videos similar to this one. Thanks for watching, see you soon.